They said he looked like a thief. Imagine being told that in broad daylight, your wrists twisted behind your back, while your classmates stare, half in shock, half in silence. 17-year-old Marcus Johnson had been running late to school, the morning sun still low, spilling golden light across cracked sidewalks, when the flashing red and blue lights caught him like prey. He hadn't stolen a thing, not even cheated on a test, yet the two officers treated him as if he were already guilty. They didn't ask questions. They didn't even say his name. They only saw his skin. Marcus had grown up in a quiet neighborhood, his father's reputation shielding their family from much of the ugliness others weren't spared. Or so he thought. His father, Thomas Johnson, wasn't just a lawyer or a respected citizen. He was one of the most powerful voices in the country, though Marcus kept that truth buried from most. His father was a justice of the Supreme Court, a man who sat in marble chambers deciding the fate of laws and lives. But here, on this cracked stretch of asphalt outside his school, none of that mattered. To these officers, Marcus was just another black boy in the wrong place at the wrong time. The crowd gathered quickly, whispers rushing like wildfire. Some kids pulled out their phones, filming. A woman across the street shook her head and muttered, "They always cause trouble." Marcus bit back his words. If he shouted, they'd twist it into resistance. If he stayed silent, they'd take his silence as guilt. He knew the unwritten rules. Don't move too quickly. Don't raise your voice. Keep your eyes down. And yet his chest burned. "Sir, please, I didn't do anything," Marcus said, his voice cracking as one officer shoved him against the hood of the police car. His cheek pressed to the cold metal, his backpack sliding off his shoulder, spilling books across the curb. A math textbook thudded open, pages fluttering in the morning wind. It was such a small, humiliating detail that in the middle of being accused of theft, the world could see that what he carried were not stolen goods, but equations and half-finished homework. The officer's grip tightened. "Don't lie to me, boy. We got a call about a suspect in a hoodie, stealing from a store 2 blocks down. You fit the description." Fit the description. Marcus wanted to scream. That phrase was a noose, a justification used countless times. He knew stories' names that had trended, faces plastered across protest signs, kids who never made it home. He had sat at the dinner table while his father, heavy with silence, warned him of this day. No matter what you do right, the world will sometimes see you wrong. But don't ever let them take your dignity. Marcus thought he understood then. He realized now he hadn't. The golden sunlight seemed cruel in its beauty, illuminating the entire scene like a stage. Every bystander could see what was happening, yet no one intervened. Maybe they were afraid. Maybe they were complicit. Or maybe they thought this was normal. Marcus's heart pounded, not only with fear, but with the suffocating weight of being made into a spectacle. "Please, just let me call my dad," Marcus begged, his voice low, desperate. The officer laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. "What's he gonna do? You think Daddy's gonna save you?" If only they knew. Marcus didn't mention it. He couldn't. Revealing his father's identity in anger felt wrong. His father had told him countless times, "Power is not for boasting. It is for justice." So Marcus swallowed his words, but the bitterness lingered like ash in his mouth. The ride to the station was long and suffocating. The inside of the squad car smelled like stale sweat and rubber, the plastic divider reflecting Marcus's face back at him, eyes wide, jaw clenched, tears he refused to let fall. His wrists ached from the cuffs. The officers' voices in the front seat blurred, a mix of casual chatter and sharp fragments of racism. Kids these days think they can do whatever. Bet his parents don't even care. They never do. Marcus closed his eyes, each word carving into him like stone. He thought of his mother, who kissed his forehead each morning and told him to be careful, as if her love could ward off bullets. He thought of his father, stern but kind, who had risen from poverty to the highest bench in the land, who carried the scars of a world that never believed in him. And now, Marcus thought of what it would do to his father to know that, despite everything, his son had been dragged into the same chains of assumption. At the station, the humiliation only deepened. He was fingerprinted, photographed, treated like a criminal before his innocence was even questioned. The officers smirked when he stammered out his story. They didn't write it down. They didn't listen. They had already written their ending for him, and it wasn't freedom. But stories don't always end the way others expect. Somewhere in the city, Thomas Johnson received a phone call. It wasn't Marcus who made it was a classmate, horrified enough to step out of silence. Within an hour, the walls of the police station trembled with the weight of something the officers hadn't anticipated. When Justice Johnson walked through those doors, his presence was an earthquake cloaked in calm. His tailored suit gleamed in the harsh fluorescent light, but it was his eyes cold, furious, unyielding that silenced the room. The officers straightened, their smirks fading into confusion. One stammered, "Sir, we save it," Johnson said. His voice was steel. Marcus, sitting in the corner with his wrists still cuffed, lifted his head. For the first time that day, he felt the heavy air shift. He wasn't just a boy accused anymore. He was a son, seen and defended. And justice, real justice, was about to begin. Under the sharp hum of fluorescent lights, Marcus could barely breathe. The officers fumbled with their papers, eyes darting between the boy they had chained and the man who now towered over them. Justice Thomas Johnson didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His silence was heavy enough, an indictment stronger than any gavel he had ever struck. Marcus had never seen his father like this, stripped of the patience he usually carried like a second skin. There was no courtroom formality here, only raw fury, sharpened by love. The officer who had shoved Marcus against the car earlier cleared his throat. "Sir, we were just following procedure." He matched the description. A hoodie, dark jeans, running near the scene. Johnson cut him off. "And his skin," he said, his tone flat but slicing. "Say it. You saw a young black boy and assumed thief. That's what you did." The words echoed, a truth they could not deny. The younger officer shifted uncomfortably, but the older one, the one with the square jaw and smug eyes, stood rigid, his lips pressed tight, unwilling to yield. Marcus could feel the tension vibrating in the room, every breath caught in the throat of the bystanders. A clerk at the desk, another officer filing reports, a man in cuffs slouched in the waiting area. Everyone was watching. Johnson stepped forward, his polished shoes clicking on the tile. "Uncuff my son. Now." The demand landed like a verdict. Keys rattled, metal clicked, and the cuffs fell away from Marcus's swollen wrists. He rubbed the red marks, his throat tightening as his father placed a hand gently on his shoulder. That small gesture carried more comfort than 100 apologies ever could. But Johnson wasn't finished. He turned back to the officers. "You will document this arrest. Every detail. And when you write your report, you will include the fact that you detained a minor without proper questioning, without evidence, and without contacting his guardians. And I assure you this will not disappear." The older officer's jaw clenched. "With all due respect, sir, there is no respect in what you've done," Johnson snapped. His voice didn't rise, but it cracked through the room like lightning. "You don't get to cloak racism in the word procedure. Not here. Not ever." Marcus felt his chest expand, a strange mixture of pride and unease. Pride because his father was fire and thunder, dismantling their lies. Unease because he knew this fight was bigger than him. It wasn't just about a boy handcuffed on a school morning. It was about centuries of suspicion and violence, about faces that had been pressed against the same cold car hoods, about the names that never made it into the headlines because their fathers didn't have power. The clerk at the desk, a young woman with tired eyes, raised her phone slightly. She was recording. So were others. Marcus could hear the subtle clicks, the buzz of cameras hiding behind half-raised hands. For once, the eyes of the crowd weren't just watching his humiliation. They were watching the truth unfold. "Dad," Marcus whispered, tugging lightly at his father's sleeve. He wanted to leave. He wanted to run far from the sterile walls of this station, from the way his classmates would talk, from the humiliation already cemented in memory. But Justice Johnson shook his head. "Not yet, son." His gaze never left the officers. "Not until they understand what they've done." The silence stretched, long and suffocating, until the station captain finally appeared, summoned by the disturbance. He was a man in his 50s, broad-shouldered, wearing authority like a badge heavier than the one pinned to his chest. His eyes flicked from Johnson to Marcus, then to his officers. "What's going on here?" he asked. Johnson answered calmly, though the fury still burned beneath his words. "Your men arrested my son. No probable cause. No evidence. No phone call. Just his skin." The captain's face darkened. He turned sharply to his men. "Is this true?" The older officer opened his mouth, but the younger one broke first, his voice trembling. He really was just walking to school, sir. He didn't do anything. We might have rushed. The captain's jaw tightened. He knew. He had probably known from the beginning. But knowledge wasn't justice, and silence wasn't accountability. Johnson straightened his shoulders. You think this is about one boy, one mistake. It's not. This is the disease that infects every corner of this country. And it will not change unless men like you stop excusing it. He paused, his eyes narrowing. I will not let this vanish into paperwork. I will not let you bury this. Marcus's hands trembled as he picked up his backpack from the floor. His books spilled again. The math textbook, his notebook filled with half-scribbled dreams of college applications and essays. He crouched, collecting them slowly, feeling every eye on him. He wanted to disappear. But then his father knelt beside him, helping him gather the scattered pages. Together, they stood. Together, they faced the room. On the drive home, silence filled the car, heavy but alive. Marcus leaned against the window, the golden afternoon light slanting across his face. His father drove with steady hands, but Marcus could see the storm in his eyes, reflected in the rearview mirror. Dad, Marcus finally whispered, I didn't tell them who you were. Johnson's grip tightened on the wheel. You shouldn't have to. I thought, maybe if I said it, they'd stop. But it felt wrong. Like I'd be using your power to buy my freedom. Marcus's voice cracked. And what about kids who don't have fathers like you? What happens to them? Johnson's throat worked as he swallowed. He pulled the car to the side of the road, putting it in park. Turning to face his son, he said, Marcus, listen to me. You should never have to buy dignity. Not with my name. Not with anyone's name. Every child deserves to walk to school without chains on their wrists. Every parent deserves to know their child will come home. That is the fight I've spent my life waging. And today, it became your fight too. Marcus's chest tightened, hot tears blurring the sunlight outside. But what if nothing changes? Johnson reached over, placing a firm hand on his son's shoulder. Then we fight harder. We fight louder. We turn our pain into law, our humiliation into change. They wanted to make you small today. Don't let them. You carry more than my name, Marcus. You carry every voice that was silenced before you. The words sank deep, planting seeds Marcus wasn't sure he was ready to grow. But something inside him shifted, a small ember sparking where only ashes had been. By the time they reached home, news vans were already lining the street. The recording from the police station had spread faster than fire, capturing not just a boy's wrongful arrest, but the moment a Supreme Court justice declared war on the very system he served. Reporters swarmed, microphones flashing, voices shouting questions. Marcus shrank back, overwhelmed. But his father stepped out of the car with the same calm ferocity he had carried into the station. He raised a hand. The crowd hushed. This is not just about my son, Justice Johnson said, his voice carrying like a bell. This is about every son, every daughter who has been judged not by their actions, but by the color of their skin. Today my son came home. Too many others have not. That is why we must change. And I promise you this, we will. The golden light bathed his face as he spoke, turning the moment into something larger than one family's pain. Marcus, watching from the car, realized his humiliation had been transformed. His father was right. This wasn't just his story anymore. It was everyone's. And he would no longer be silent. The video didn't just spread. It exploded. By evening, Marcus's name was everywhere, hashtags flooding social media, news anchors replaying the clip of him in handcuffs while his father's voice cut through with sharp, unwavering truth. Students who had filmed it at school shared their shaky footage online, showing the moment he was pinned against the police car, his math book tumbling open. The image became a symbol, a boy framed as a criminal while his education spilled into the street. Marcus sat on the couch in the living room, the TV muted, his phone vibrating non-stop with notifications. Some messages were supportive classmates sending love, strangers calling him brave. Others dripped with venom, threats, slurs, comments that twisted the story into something ugly. He scrolled until the words blurred, then shoved the phone face down on the cushion. His mother, Angela, sat beside him, her hand resting over his. Don't read them, she said softly. They don't see you. They only see what they want to see. Marcus nodded, though the words had already sunk into his chest like stones. It doesn't matter what I do, he whispered. They'll always see me that way. Before his mother could respond, His father entered, his tie loosened, his face lined with exhaustion. But his eyes still carried fire. He lowered himself into the chair across from them, clasping his hands together. "We need to talk," he said. His tone was calm but serious, the kind of voice Marcus had heard him use when explaining difficult truths in court. Angela straightened. "Thomas, maybe not tonight. He's been through enough." "No," Johnson said firmly. "This is exactly the night we talk. Because what happened to Marcus is not ending with today. It's the beginning of something bigger." Marcus looked up, wary. "What do you mean?" Johnson leaned forward. "The video is public. The country is watching. There will be pressure, investigations, hearings. And I can't step away from it, not as a justice, not as a father. This case could reshape policy, Marcus. It could force real accountability. But I don't want to be some symbol." Marcus burst out. His voice cracked, the rawness spilling out. "I just wanted to go to school. I didn't ask for any of this." His father's expression softened, but his voice stayed steady. "I know, son. I would give anything for you to never know this pain. But we don't choose the fights that come to our door. We only choose how we face them." Angela squeezed Marcus's hand. "And you won't face it alone." The words lingered, heavy and comforting. Yet Marcus still felt the weight pressing down. He thought of the videos, the strangers debating his humanity as if it were up for discussion. He thought of walking through school tomorrow and seeing the stares, hearing the whispers. He thought of the officers' hands on him, the way they laughed. "I don't know if I'm strong enough," he said quietly. His father shook his head. "You already are. You stood there, humiliated, and you didn't break. You held on to your dignity. That strength is rare, Marcus. And it's yours." That night, Marcus barely slept. His dreams blurred with flashing lights, cold handcuffs, and voices chanting his name. When he woke, the sky outside was still dark, but already, reporters had gathered again on the street. At school, the atmosphere was electric. Some students greeted him with hugs, some with cautious nods, and others with the kind of silence that spoke louder than words. Teachers stumbled through awkward encouragements. In the cafeteria, a group of kids he barely knew clapped when he walked by, chanting his name as if he were a hero. It made him want to vanish. But it was in history class, of all places, that he felt the shift. His teacher, Mr. Carter, an older black man with silver hair, paused his lecture and looked directly at Marcus. "We've been studying civil rights," he said, his voice deliberate. "And today, history walked into our classroom. Marcus, you are living what others before you fought against. Don't ever forget you are not alone in this." The words lit something in Marcus, small but steady. Not pride, not yet, but recognition. Meanwhile, the officers who had arrested him faced their own storm. Their names leaked online. Protests formed outside the precinct. The police union scrambled to defend them, releasing statements about procedure and community safety. But the video told a different story, and the country wasn't buying it. A week later, hearings began. Cameras lined the courthouse steps. Marcus and his family were escorted inside through a back entrance. But still, the noise of the crowd followed them, chants for justice, shouts of anger, cries of support. Sitting at the long table, Marcus felt his stomach twist. He wasn't used to microphones, to the gaze of hundreds. His father sat beside him, steady as stone, his presence both shield and weight. When it was his turn to speak, Marcus's hands trembled. He leaned toward the microphone, his voice shaky at first. I was just going to school. That's all. I didn't steal anything. I didn't even know what they were talking about. But they didn't ask me. They just saw me. And that was enough." He paused, breath catching. The room was silent, waiting. He swallowed and continued. "I kept thinking, if my dad wasn't who he is, would I even be here right now? Or would I be another name people hashtag for a week and then forget? That's what scares me. Not just what happened to me, but what keeps happening to kids who don't have cameras, or powerful parents, or people who believe them." His voice grew stronger. "I don't want this to be just about me. I want it to be about everyone who's been treated like I was. Because none of us should live afraid of walking down the street." When he finished, the silence held. Then, slowly, applause broke out, not polite, not forced, but fierce, rising like a wave. Marcus's chest heaved. He had spoken, and the world had heard. But outside the courtroom, the backlash was already sharpening. Commentators accused his father of bias, of using personal pain to shape public policy. Anonymous threats arrived in the family's mailbox. On one news channel, a panel debated whether Marcus had provoked the officers, twisting his dignity into suspicion. Marcus watched it all with a mix of rage and numbness. "They'll never stop," he muttered one night, slamming the remote down. "No matter what I say, they'll find a way to make me the villain." His father looked at him, eyes steady. "Then you keep telling the truth until they can't ignore it anymore." And for the first time, Marcus believed he just might. The weeks that followed felt like living inside a storm. Marcus woke each morning to see his face on the news, his name on headlines, his story twisted into debates. Supporters filled the streets with signs that read "Justice for Marcus," their chants echoing through the city. Opponents hurled slurs online, some even gathering outside his home with angry banners, accusing his family of exploiting the system. Every day was louder, sharper, harder. But in the middle of that chaos, Marcus found a strange strength. He had learned to stand in front of cameras, to speak without letting his voice crack, to answer questions that cut deep without flinching. Each time he spoke, he felt less like the boy who had been shoved against a car hood and more like someone who carried the voices of thousands. His humiliation was no longer his own. It had been turned into a weapon for truth. The hearings stretched on. The officers were placed on trial, their actions dissected under harsh light. Videos were replayed, expert witnesses called, statistics presented showing patterns of racial profiling across the country. Marcus sat through it all, his stomach twisted, his fists clenched. Sometimes he wanted to shout. Sometimes he wanted to leave. But every time his father glanced at him with quiet, steady eyes, Marcus stayed. One night, after a particularly brutal session where the defense tried to smear his reputation, Marcus sat on the porch steps, his face buried in his hands. His father joined him, sitting quietly for a long time before speaking. "They want you to break," Justice Johnson said softly. "Because if you break, they don't have to face what they've done. But you haven't broken, and that is what terrifies them." Marcus lifted his head, tears streaking his cheeks. What if it doesn't matter? What if they get away with it anyway? Johnson's gaze was steady, his voice low but fierce. "Change is slow, son. Justice is slower. But it bends because people refuse to let it stay the same. And tonight, because of you, more people are refusing than ever before." The trial reached its climax with Marcus's testimony replayed to the jury. His trembling voice, his raw honesty, became the heartbeat of the case. The prosecution painted the officer's actions as not just a mistake, but a symptom of something rotten and systemic. The defense clung to procedure, but the video, the undeniable image of a boy cuffed with his math book on the ground, spoke louder than any excuse. When the verdict finally came, the air was electric. The jury foreperson stood, papers trembling in their hand. "We, the jury, find the defendants guilty on all counts." The words rang through the courtroom. Gasps, sobs, cheers broke out. Marcus gripped his father's hand, his chest heaving with relief, disbelief, and something like hope. For the first time since that morning outside his school, he felt the weight lift, if only slightly. But his father leaned close, whispering, "Remember, Marcus, this is one victory, not the war." Outside, the crowd erupted. Reporters shoved microphones, protesters cheered, strangers wept. Marcus stepped forward, his father at his side, and faced the sea of faces. He raised his voice, strong and steady now. "This isn't just about me," he said. "It's about every kid who has been judged guilty before they've spoken a word. Today, the system admitted it was wrong. But tomorrow, we have to make sure it changes. Because no one else should live what I lived. No one." The golden evening light bathed him as he spoke, just as it had the morning he was arrested. But this time, it wasn't cruel. It was warm, a glow that turned his words into something almost sacred. Cameras captured the image, a boy standing beside his father, framed in sunlight, no longer in chains but in strength. In the weeks that followed, new legislation was proposed, sparked by his case. Schools invited Marcus to speak, his words inspiring students who had once stayed silent. His story became part of textbooks, part of the national conversation, part of something bigger than even his father's rulings. One evening, months later, Marcus stood alone on the same street where he had been arrested. The cracks in the sidewalk were the same, the lamppost leaning just as it had before. He closed his eyes and felt the memory wash over him, the flashing lights, the cold cuffs, the humiliation. But when he opened his eyes, he saw something different. Kids were laughing as they walked home, free and unafraid. The air was still heavy with the battles ahead, but lighter than before. He whispered to himself, "They didn't break me." Behind him, his father's voice carried gently, "No, son, they never will." And together, they walked home under the golden light, not as victims, but as proof that even in a broken world, justice could be born from pain, and dignity could survive anything. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.